Hello, and welcome to the Daily Space for today, Wednesday, December 16th, 2020. I am your host, Annie Wilson. Most weekdays, we're here putting science into your brain. Usually Wednesdays are for Rocket Roundup, and today is no different. So, let's get to it, shall we? First up, on December 9th at 2014 UTC, a Long March 11 rocket took off from LC-4 at Xicheng Satellite Launch Center in southwestern China. On board were a pair of G-CAM satellites. That stands for, hold on, bear with me, it's a little long, Gravitational Wave High Energy Electromagnetic Counterpart All-Sky Monitor. There, we got it, we made it. Anyways, the satellites will situate themselves on opposite sides of the Earth and will work together like a pair of eyes to watch the entire sky. They're looking for fluctuations in the gamma ray bit of the electromagnetic spectrum and for charged particles. Not a lot of objects give off light at these high energy wavelengths, and even fewer give off both light and particles. One of the few events to fit the bill is a kilonova, a flash of light and particles that occur when two neutron stars merge. These events were identified for the first time thanks to their gravitational waves back in 2017. That initial discovery inspired the rapid-fire construction and launch of these twin spacecraft. It usually takes years to design and construct a space mission, so this is pretty remarkable. Since it's not practical to identify the location of gamma rays or cosmic rays with a single detector, the twin spacecraft make things a bit easier. By looking at the difference in time between when each spacecraft detects light and particles, they can narrow down where in the sky a new merger has taken place. This is a super cool new set of science missions, and we're looking forward to seeing what all they discover. Reminder, rocket launches are loud. Alright, next up on December 9th at 22:45 UTC, SpaceX did a suborbital test of their Starship at their compound at Boca Chica, Texas. Starship SN8's 12.5-kilometer hop was successful, mostly. The shiny steel cylinder reached altitude and hung in the air on one engine for several moments. After the engine cut off, it looks like it's going to fall out of the sky, but instead the craft initiated its flip and belly flop maneuver. This was the first time this maneuver was demonstrated in a real vehicle. After a controlled glide back to Earth, the engines reignited and flipped the craft upright. Unfortunately, the engines lost thrust and SN8 hit the ground a little too fast and exploded, right in the middle of the landing pad. The SpaceX livestream showed the smoking remains and signed off with, "Awesome test! Congrats, spaceship team!" The whole flight lasted less than 7 minutes. Afterwards, SpaceX CEO took to Twitter to explain fuel header tank pressure was low during the landing burn, causing touchdown velocity to be high and rapid unplanned disassembly. But we got all the data we needed. Reminder, hopping grain silos are loud,
5, 4,
as are explosions.
3, 2, 1, 0. We have liftoff.
Alright, we split this up into a bunch of different chunks. So here's the belly flop. You You can see it's on the one engine. And then it just, like, cuts, and it's falling, right? But it's a controlled fall. And it is totally flopping down into that horizontal position instead of just falling straight from the sky. And there, now it's going right into the glide. It's pretty amazing. And the landing, because it's not a SpaceX launch without a SpaceX landing. Yeah. There you have it, folks. It went up, it did its thing, it came down, and it went boom. And more launches after this short break. Next up, on December 11th at 1:09 UTC, United Launch Alliance launched a Delta IV Heavy from Slick 37 Bravo at Cape Canaveral in Florida. The payload was classified. This launch was originally supposed to take place back in July 2020, but was pushed to August 26, 2020. It then suffered a further 6 scrubs or aborts because of ground support equipment issues, with one attempt coming in as close as T-7 seconds before aborting. After these aborts, ULA performed maintenance on the swing arm system at the launch pad. This took 3 months. Just in case, ULA also performed maintenance on the swing arm system at Slick 6, the West Coast Delta IV launch pad. Although the payload is classified, the mission patch isn't. A lone wolf is front and center on snow-covered ground, howling at the sky. In the background, 4 other wolves stand in front of a mountain range under a snowy nighttime sky. At the top of the patch is the name of the mission and launch location. According to the National Reconnaissance Office, the wolf's howl represents its capability to warn the pack at the first point of detection against threats. The pack of 5 wolves is meant to represent solidarity across the Five Eyes community. Next up, on December 13th at 17:30 UTC, SpaceX launched a Falcon 9 from Slick 40 at Cape Canaveral in Florida. On board was the Sirius XM's SXM7, the 7th satellite in their constellation that provides satellite radio. According to the company, SXM7 will replace the XM3 satellite, which launched on a Sea-Launch Zenit 3SL back in 2005 when XM Radio was an independent company. Most of Sirius XM satellites are in geostationary orbit. SXM7 was deployed into a 234 by 19,380 kilometer orbit at a 27-degree inclination. This is lower than the typical 250 by 35,786 kilometer geostationary transfer orbit. The change was needed so the first stage had enough fuel for landing as it sent the over 7 metric ton satellite into orbit. For those of you keeping track at home, this launch marked the 102nd successful Falcon 9 launch and the 69th successful first stage landing. This was the 7th flight for this particular booster, Bravo 1051, and it landed on the drone ship Just Read the Instructions. Both fairings were recovered from the water. One of the fairings was new, and the other was previously flown. Reminder, rocket launches...
Everything looking good for an on-time liftoff today. Let's listen in on the final seconds of the countdown.
Reminder, rocket launches are loud. You can see the LOX venting off of the craft.
9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Ignition, and we have liftoff.
Stage 1 propulsion nominal.
Vehicle's pitching downrange.
And it's not a SpaceX launch without a SpaceX landing.
And there's that view. Once again, this is the 7th flight and therefore the 7th landing of this particular booster, also marking the 69th successful recovery of a Falcon 9 first stage.
So we've gotten spoiled by live video feeds of the boosters landing, but sometimes the feed just doesn't work, and that's exactly what happened in that clip.
And there's that view. Once again, this is the 7th flight and therefore the 7th landing of this particular booster, also marking the 69th successful recovery of a Falcon 9 first stage.
Finally, for this week, on December 14th at 5:50 UTC, the Russian Space Forces successfully launched the second Angara A5 from the Plesetsk Cosmodrome. The vehicle carried a mass simulator rather than a satellite because this was a development flight. This was a far less exciting version of a Falcon Heavy use of a Tesla as a mass simulator. This launch came 6 years after the first Angara A5 launch, which was also a development test flight. This long timeline is due in part to quality control problems. According to Roscosmos, Angara rockets do not use significant amounts of aggressive and toxic propellants. This will improve environmental safety both in the areas next to the launch complex and the drop zones. The aggressive and toxic propellants that the Russian Space Agency is referring to is probably unsymmetrical dimethylhydrazine and nitrogen tetroxide. These two chemicals don't need to be kept cold and are essentially stable until they mix. Upon contact, they ignite, which allows for a simpler engine design. Unfortunately, they are both highly toxic and require workers to be in hazmat gear when working with anything related to the fuels. Angara A5 uses RP1, which is a purified form of kerosene, and super chilled liquid oxygen. The liquid oxygen will boil off if it's not kept cold, so it's not possible to fill a fuel tank and just let it sit. But the RP1 and liquid oxygen combination is mostly harmless when compared to the hypergolic fuels like unsymmetrical dimethylhydrazine and nitrogen tetroxide. Anyways, on to the launch video. Good stuff. I'll be back with spaceflight statistics after the break. To wrap things up, here's a running tally of a few spaceflight statistics for the current year. There are currently 5 toilets in space. 2 are installed on the International Space Station, 1 is on the Crew Dragon, 1 is on the Soyuz, and 1 isn't installed yet. It will eventually have a home on the International Space Station. We've burned up 3 toilets in the atmosphere so far this year. Humanity has put a whopping 1,182 satellites into orbit. That includes those launched from other in-orbit craft like the ISS. 1,151 satellites have been launched directly from rockets, and of those, 833 were Starlinks. There have been 107 total orbital launch attempts for the year. That includes 10 failures. I keep track of orbital launches by where they launched from, also known as spaceport. Here's that breakdown. China, 37, USA, 36, Kazakhstan 7, Russia 7, French Guiana 6, New Zealand 6, Japan 4, Iran 2, India 1, Israel 1. And your random space fact for the week comes to us from community member Uncle Willie. Every major planet has been used by a spacecraft for a gravity assist or trajectory change maneuver, as well as Earth's moon and Titan. And that rounds out our show for today. Thank you so much all for listening. I have been your host, Annie Wilson. Today's script was written and edited by Pamela Gay, Eric Mattis, Ali Pelfrey, and myself. Our web content will be produced by Beth Johnson. Our executive producer and fearless leader is Dr. Pamela Gay. The Daily Space is a product of the Planetary Science Institute, a 501c3 dedicated to exploring our solar system and beyond. We are here thanks to the generous contributions of people just like you. The best way you can support us is through Patreon at patreon.com/CosmoQuestX. Like us? Please tell a friend. You never know whose life you can change by adding a daily dose of science.